She was my friend's aunt, elegant, untouchable, until one night she whispered, "You're the only one who sees me this way." I never thought much about visiting my friend's house that evening. It was supposed to be simple, hang out, maybe watch a game, share some food. Nothing unusual. But the moment the front door opened, I was caught off guard. Standing there was not my friend, but a woman whose presence filled the space so effortlessly that for a moment, I forgot what I was supposed to say. She was his aunt. I'd heard of her in passing, but nothing could have prepared me for the reality of her. She must have been in her early 40s, with that kind of natural grace that doesn't come from trying to impress anyone. Her dark hair fell loosely over her shoulders, a few strands catching the hallway light. There was an ease in her smile, warm but not hurried, as though she had all the time in the world to notice someone properly. "Come in," she said, her voice soft yet steady, carrying a warmth that instantly disarmed me. She stepped aside, and as I passed, I caught the faintest trace of her perfume, something subtle, clean, and undeniably feminine. It lingered, the way a song's last note hangs in the air long after it's finished. I followed her into the living room, where she moved with a calm assurance. Every small gesture seemed deliberate yet unpretentious, the way she straightened a cushion, the way her fingers brushed lightly along the table's edge as if checking everything was in its place. She asked if I wanted tea or coffee, and when she set the cup before me, her fingertips brushed the back of my hand, light, almost accidental. But it was enough to send a small ripple through me, the kind that makes you suddenly aware of your own heartbeat. It wasn't just her appearance that struck me. It was the way she carried herself. There was no rush, no performative energy like I often saw in people my own age. Instead, she had a steadiness, as if she had already outgrown the need to prove anything. Yet behind her calm expression, there was something else, a flicker of tiredness in her eyes, like a story quietly folded away. As we spoke, she asked questions about my studies, my plans, even about the music I listened to. Her attention was so focused it almost startled me. It's rare, I thought, to be listened to like that, as if every word mattered, as if I wasn't just another young man passing through her nephew's life. When my friend finally walked in, laughing and greeting me, it was almost a disruption. Something had already shifted in those few minutes. I found myself noticing her more than I should, the way her laughter softened her face, the way her eyes lingered just a second longer than necessary when she looked at me. It was nothing dramatic, nothing anyone else would have seen. But for me, that evening marked the beginning. A beginning I hadn't expected, and one I couldn't forget. In the days that followed, I found myself noticing her in ways I couldn't easily explain. She wasn't always the center of attention. In fact, most of the time she moved quietly in the background of her home, going about her routines while my friend and I talked or played games. But somehow, my focus kept drifting toward her. It was the small things first. The way she would tuck a strand of hair behind her ear while reading at the dining table, her brow gently furrowed in concentration. Or the sound of her laughter floating down the hallway when she spoke on the phone, light, melodic, and strangely infectious. I'd catch myself pausing mid-conversation with my friend, straining to hear it just a little longer. Sometimes, I'd find her in the kitchen, sleeves rolled just enough to reveal the softness of her forearms, her movements unhurried as she prepared food. She wasn't flashy about it, never drawing attention, yet there was a grace in the way she stirred a pot or arranged plates, like everything she did carried intention. One evening, while my friend stepped out to take a call, she slipped into the room where I sat. She asked me about school, about what I wanted to do in the years ahead. Her tone was casual, but her eyes, steady, curious, made me feel as though my answers mattered more than they should have. Most people my age asked questions just to fill silence, but she listened. Really listened. Her gaze didn't wander, her smile didn't fade. She leaned slightly forward, her hand resting on the back of my chair, close enough that I felt the warmth radiating from her skin. I told her things I hadn't even planned to share, small dreams I usually kept to myself, worries I rarely admitted. And when I finished, she nodded with a softness that made my chest tighten. "You're thoughtful," she said quietly, almost as if she was speaking more to herself than to me. Those words lingered long after she walked away. Later that night, as we all sat together, I noticed the faint tiredness in her eyes. She laughed at my friend's jokes, kept the conversation light, but I couldn't shake the feeling that beneath her calm surface was something heavier. A silence she carried when no one else was paying attention. And then there were the small touches, fleeting, accidental perhaps, but impossible to ignore. Her hand brushing mine as she passed me a dish at dinner. The faint pressure of her shoulder as she leaned beside me to glance at something on my phone screen. Each moment so subtle it could have been explained away, and yet, I felt each one like a spark under my skin. These were not grand gestures. They were quiet, almost invisible moments. But sometimes it's the quietest things that say the most. And in those small exchanges, a connection was quietly forming, one I couldn't yet name, but couldn't ignore either. It was late one evening when it happened. My friend had gone out suddenly, leaving me at the house with the excuse that he wouldn't be long. I was sitting in the living room, scrolling through my phone, when she appeared. She walked in quietly, carrying a soft woolen shawl draped around her shoulders. The room's single lamp painted her in a warm glow, and for a moment I was too caught up in the image of her, the relaxed elegance of someone who didn't need to dress up to be striking. She gave me a small smile before settling into the chair across from me. "You don't mind the company, do you?" she asked, her tone light but her eyes searching mine for something deeper. "Of course not," I said, setting my phone aside. She folded her hands in her lap, and for a moment the room was quiet except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, but there was a trace of something else beneath it. "You know, people often think they know me," she began. "They see what they want to see, confident, put together, someone who always has the right words. But it's strange, isn't it? To be surrounded by people and still feel invisible." Her words surprised me. I had always seen her as the calm center of any room, the one who made others feel comfortable. To hear her speak of invisibility felt almost unreal. I leaned forward, resting my arms on my knees. "I don't think you're invisible," I said quietly. "At least, not to me." She gave a soft, almost incredulous laugh, though her eyes shimmered as though touched by something more tender. She looked down, her fingers twisting gently at the edge of her sleeve, a small gesture that betrayed the vulnerability she rarely showed. "I suppose that's what makes it harder," she whispered. "You get used to people seeing the surface of you, the polished part, but not the rest. The tiredness. The doubts. The parts you're not proud of." I felt an ache in my chest, the kind that comes when someone lets you glimpse a truth they don't share with many. I didn't try to offer advice or fix her feelings. Instead, I simply reached across the space between us and laid my hand gently over hers. Her skin was warm, her hand soft yet tense beneath my touch. For a second, I thought she might pull away, but she didn't. Instead, she exhaled slowly, her shoulders loosening just slightly, as if the simple act of being touched without expectation was a relief. We stayed like that for a while, not speaking. The silence wasn't heavy, it was full, like the kind of silence you share with someone who suddenly feels closer than they did a moment before. That night, I realized something had shifted. She was no longer just my friend's aunt, a woman whose presence I admired from afar. She had become something else, someone who trusted me with a part of her she hid from the world. And that trust, it bound me to her in a way I couldn't explain. After that evening, something subtle but undeniable changed between us. It wasn't spoken, nor was it deliberate. But every time we were in the same room, I could feel it, the weight of awareness, as though we were both quietly conscious of a line we hadn't crossed, but couldn't stop approaching. When I entered the house, her eyes would find me, almost instinctively. A quick glance that should have been casual but carried warmth, followed by a fleeting smile that lingered longer than necessary. She still carried herself with the same calm poise, but now, I sensed hesitation in her movements when I was near, as though she, too, had begun to notice what was forming in the spaces between us. One afternoon, I found her in the living room with a book in her hand. She looked up as I entered, her lips curving into a smile that felt softer, more personal than before. She extended the book toward me, brushing my fingers lightly as she placed it in my palm. The touch lasted only a second, but it was enough. My breath caught, and I noticed her glance away quickly, as if she had betrayed too much in that tiny gesture. "You might like this one," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "It's thoughtful, the kind of story you'd pay attention to." Her words weren't just about the book, and I knew it. There was something in her tone that hinted at the way she had begun to see me, too, not just as her nephew's friend, but as someone with depth, someone worth noticing. In the evenings, our conversations stretched longer. Sometimes they were light-hearted, laughter shared over little things. Other times, they carried a depth that pulled me in, questions about meaning, about choices, about whether we truly ever know ourselves. I realized I craved her voice, the way she spoke with a mixture of certainty and quiet doubt. But what unsettled me most were the silences. The pauses that lingered after a laugh, the moments when our eyes met and neither of us looked away. There was one evening, in particular, when I caught her gaze and noticed her eyes dip, for the briefest second, toward my lips before flicking back to mine. My heart raced, and I tried to steady myself, though every instinct told me something had shifted. I didn't say anything. Neither did she. But the silence itself was charged, alive, carrying more meaning than words could have. When my friend re-entered the room, the air between us dissolved into casual normalcy again, but only on the surface. From that point forward, every interaction carried an undertone, as if we were both standing at the edge of something neither of us had planned for. Her compliments felt different, her smiles softer, her presence heavier. And though nothing had been spoken, we both knew, the closeness we shared was no longer innocent. Something unspoken had taken root. Something tender, dangerous, and impossible to ignore. It was one of those evenings when the house felt unusually still. My friend had stepped out again, leaving just the two of us. I found her sitting on the porch, a light shawl draped around her shoulders, gazing into the quiet street as the last traces of daylight melted into dusk. I hesitated at the doorway for a moment before joining her. The chair beside hers creaked softly as I sat down, and she turned her head, offering me a small smile, one that looked almost tired, almost fragile. For a while, neither of us spoke. The air was warm, carrying the faint scent of jasmine from the garden. I could hear the distant hum of a car passing somewhere down the road, the rhythmic chirp of crickets filling the silence. Then, almost out of nowhere, she said softly, "Do you ever feel like people only see the version of you that's convenient for them?" I glanced at her, surprised by the sudden gravity in her voice. She wasn't looking at me. Her eyes were fixed ahead, distant, as though she was speaking to the night itself. "What do you mean?" I asked, careful not to sound too eager. She shifted slightly, pulling the shawl tighter around her shoulders. "All my life, people have told me who I am. Strong. Reliable. Composed. The aunt who always knows what to say, the woman who always has herself together. And I let them believe it. Maybe it was easier that way." Her voice faltered, just enough to make my chest tighten. I waited, giving her the silence she seemed to need. "But inside," she continued, her voice quieter now, "there are parts of me no one bothers to notice. The doubts. The loneliness. The desire to just be seen. Not as someone's aunt, not as someone who has it all figured out. Just me." She finally turned toward me then, and her eyes glistened in the dim light. Vulnerability shone through them, raw, unguarded, startling in its honesty. And then she whispered it. Words so soft I almost thought I'd imagined them, "You're the only one who sees me this way." The weight of her confession sank deep. My breath caught, and for a moment I couldn't find words. My hand moved almost instinctively, resting gently on her forearm. Her skin was warm beneath my fingertips, her pulse quick but steady. She didn't pull away. Instead, she let her hand slide over mine, her thumb brushing lightly as though searching for reassurance. The closeness between us was overwhelming, not just physical, but something deeper, as if she had entrusted me with a truth she had hidden for years. I wanted to say something, anything, but words felt clumsy compared to the silence that wrapped around us. So I just sat there with her, holding that moment, knowing it was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. From that night on, nothing could be the same. After she whispered those words, "You're the only one who sees me this way," the air between us felt charged, almost fragile. It was as if an invisible thread had formed, connecting us in a space neither of us had permission to explore, yet neither could ignore. Every glance, every accidental brush of her hand now carried a weight that neither of us spoke aloud. We continued to spend time together, but the dynamic had shifted. Her smiles lingered a beat longer. Her laughter sometimes caught in her throat when our eyes met. When we spoke, her voice softened in a way that drew me in, making me lean closer without realizing it. I could feel her awareness of me, as if she, too, was holding back, testing the boundaries without crossing them. One evening, we were sitting together on the couch, casually flipping through a photo album my friend had left lying around. I was reading the captions aloud when her shoulder brushed mine. It was light, accidental, but in the quiet room it felt monumental. My breath caught. She didn't pull away, instead, she shifted slightly closer, just enough that our knees almost touched. My heart raced, and I could feel the heat in my chest, the sharp awareness of every small movement. I wanted to reach for her hand, to bridge the gap, but I hesitated. There was a line I couldn't ignore, a line drawn by circumstance, by her being my friend's aunt, by the quiet rules of propriety we both respected. Yet every moment of proximity, every lingering glance, spoke louder than any words ever could. Her fingers twitched slightly as she adjusted her shawl, and our eyes met. In that brief lock of gazes, I saw the same conflict mirrored in her expression, desire tempered by restraint, curiosity held in check by fear of crossing boundaries. I realized then that neither of us wanted to rush, and yet neither of us wanted to step back completely. We sat there in silence for what felt like an eternity, the room heavy with unsaid things. The soft hum of the ceiling fan, the faint aroma of jasmine from the garden, the distant sounds of night, all of it became a backdrop to the quiet tension that enveloped us. Every brush of hair from her shoulder to my arm, every slight tilt of her head toward mine, was a statement neither of us dared to voice. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what this means, or where it could go. I nodded slowly, understanding perfectly. Neither do I said, my hand hovering near hers before settling back. But I don't want to lose this. Whatever this is. She gave a small, almost shy smile. Her eyes softened, and she exhaled as though a weight had been lifted. Neither do I, she admitted. In that moment, we shared an unspoken promise, to honor the connection, to savor the closeness, and to let it exist without forcing it into definitions or expectations. Desire was there, undeniable, but so was patience, respect, and a deep appreciation for the quiet intimacy we had discovered. It was a delicate balance, a dance of near touches, lingering glances, and restrained affection, and it was beautiful in its subtlety. The days that followed were quieter, but somehow richer. Our connection didn't require words anymore. It existed in the way we shared a space, in the subtle rhythms of our interactions, in the comfortable silences that felt more alive than any conversation. Each encounter was measured, deliberate, yet effortless, a slow dance of proximity and restraint. One evening, I found her on the porch again, wrapped in her shawl, watching the sky shift from amber to deep violet. The faint scent of jasmine floated through the air, mingling with the coolness of approaching night. I joined her, careful not to make the moment feel heavy or pressured, and she didn't seem surprised, as if she had expected me, or perhaps as if we had fallen into this rhythm naturally. We sat together, close but not touching, and for a while, neither of us spoke. The only sounds were the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant hum of a passing car. Yet, in that quiet, there was intimacy, a feeling so rare and delicate that it needed no words. I could feel her presence beside me like a warm current, steady and calming, and I sensed that she felt the same about me. Eventually, she glanced at me, her eyes soft and luminous in the fading light. "I'm glad," she whispered, almost to herself. "That you see me." I met her gaze, understanding the depth of what she meant. To be truly seen, in a world that often only schemes surfaces, was a gift, and it had been offered to me freely. I wanted to tell her that she had given me the same gift, that I had never felt closer to anyone in such a quiet, profound way. But instead, I simply reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face, tucking it gently behind her ear. Her skin was warm, and she didn't move away. We shared a long, lingering moment, a touch, a glance, a shared breath, that said more than words ever could. The connection we had forged wasn't about urgency or declarations, it was about understanding, trust, and the comfort of being completely known by someone who mattered. When it was finally time for me to leave, she stood and walked me to the door. Our hands brushed briefly as she handed me my jacket, and the simple contact sent a familiar thrill through me. She looked up at me, eyes soft, lips curved in a small, knowing smile. I hesitated, wanting to linger, to say something more, but knew the moment was perfect in its restraint. We parted that night without promises or dramatic declarations, yet the bond between us was unshakable. Every glance, every subtle touch, every unspoken understanding had created a closeness that neither time nor circumstance could diminish. I walked away carrying the warmth of her presence, the echo of her words, and the knowledge that she had entrusted me with a piece of herself few others had ever seen. And in that quiet, unassuming way, our story found its resolution. It wasn't loud or public. It wasn't marked by grand gestures or dramatic confessions. It was simply real, a slow-burning connection that would endure because it was built on honesty, respect, and the extraordinary comfort of being truly seen. We parted that night without promises or dramatic declarations, yet the bond between us was unshakable. Every glance, every subtle touch, every unspoken understanding had created a closeness that neither time nor circumstance could diminish. I walked away carrying the warmth of her presence, the echo of her words, and the knowledge that she had entrusted me with a piece of herself few others had ever seen. And in that quiet, unassuming way, our story found its resolution. It wasn't loud or public. It wasn't marked by grand gestures or dramatic confessions. It was simply real, a slow-burning connection that would endure because it was built on honesty, respect, and the extraordinary comfort of being truly seen. If you felt the quiet magic of this story, make sure to watch the full journey, every small glance, every whispered word, and every moment that built this unforgettable connection. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss another slow-burn romance story like this.